save the clap to see if I'm okay by the end of the night, and then you can clap if it was okay. But thank you so much. Thank you for that warm welcome. And thank you, Dalton, again for inviting me here. Can you just raise your hand if you're a parent at Dalton, just so I can kind of see if you're a parent, and others are teachers. Can you just raise your hand if you're teachers? I know you're not at Dalton, but you're a teacher at another place. That's lovely. And those parents at Dalton, who has children under 5 years of age? Under 10? Or yeah, anyone over 10? You might have a bit of both. Great. That just helps me too. So so whether you're a teacher or a parent, I hope that what I'm going to share tonight will help you think about learning perhaps in a new way compared to when we were at school anyway. I'm going to share some stories from Australia, where I'm based most of the time. I've just come back from working with 2 schools in Singapore, where we were talking about some similar things as well. And I have also a partner site in Beijing. So my relationship with Dalton is a very special one to me. As Angela said, it's been 5 years now. So I see myself as a partner in learning with the Dalton leaders and educators. And it's a joy that I get to meet your children every year as well. And then we follow up, as Angela said, on Zoom sessions. But it's very important to me that we have that partnership together so I can really understand the culture of Dalton. Tomorrow I'm working with Little Dalton. And so when I talk about Dalton, it's both. But it's very important for me to have that long-term relationship because I think that's the best way I can help. I'm here to help and support the school to grow and to be continually improving for your children. Right? So without further ado, I'll kind of get into the talk tonight. So Cultivating Learner Agency, as Angela mentioned, this is based on my book, A Culture of Agency, which came about really, it's my second book. The first one was written quite a few years ago now, which was about listening to children and respecting their ideas and building learning from their thinking and their theories. So very inspired by Reggio Emilia, if you've heard of the schools in Reggio Emilia. And it took me a long while to find the next thing I wanted to write about. And it really came to me when I was in classrooms and preschools in my home of Adelaide. And I have the honour of coaching teachers and going into their classrooms. And so many learning spaces I was in, the children just had this, I didn't know what I wanted to write about, except I knew that there was something in these learning spaces, the culture of learning that these teachers had created, where the children were really purposeful. They were engaged in really meaningful work. It's like, they were almost business-like. So whether they were 4 years old or 10 years old, it was like, we've got important work to do here. And so my idea came from observing the children and also the teachers about what the teachers did to create this way of being a learner and being successful as a learner. So there's just a few of the photographs from some of the schools and the teachers that I researched. So tonight, the 3 main things that I hope that I can share with you. One is, what is agency? I mean, this could be a whole day just exploring that question, but I'll just give you a few of my thoughts tonight. What is agency? Why is it important? This has got a bit of a lag, I'm sorry. And what can agentic learning look like? So what does it look like? What can it look like in schools and preschools? So they're the 3 questions I'd like to explore. So here's the first quote about a sense of agency. This comes from Rosemary Roberts, A feeling that you can make a difference to your own life and to the lives of other people. So many of us will remember just a few years ago when all the borders were closed and we had lots of restrictions during the pandemic. And I often reflect on that because I think for many of us we had a lack of agency in our lives. Our sense of agency was diminished because so many choices were taken away from us. We couldn't visit family. We might not have been able to go to work. I know I couldn't come to Dalton for 3 years, I think, yeah? And so sometimes when we think about when a lot of our choices in life are taken away from us, how that makes us feel. It makes us feel, it can lead to depression. It makes us feel a little bit helpless. And so if we reverse that and think about the sense of agency, this sense of feeling like you can make a difference to your own life, I think it's, for me, pretty simple in thinking about how we want that for our children as well. So let's think about that a little bit more. One way to help us understand what this sense of agency is thinking about an external locus of control or an internal locus of control. All right, let me explain what that means. An external locus of control would be thinking, why do things always happen to me? There's nothing I can do about it. Why bother trying? I have no control over this. I know I had some of those feelings during COVID, right? When I didn't feel a sense of agency. It's like this big idea of things happen to me that I have no control over. But if we think about an internal locus of control or a sense of agency, is thinking about it as, instead of things happen to me, I make things happen. I make things happen. Look what I can do. I determine my future. And if I don't like it, I need to, and I can change it. So I hope that kind of makes sense to you, that part of this sense of agency is feeling like this inner drive, this inner potential that we all have. Rather than feeling it's the external happening to us, we actually can make some change. We actually are the drivers. So it's a feeling that you're in charge of your learning. So when we're thinking about children, you know, whether they're babies or whether they're adolescents, this feeling that you're in charge of your learning, that you're leading your learning. Learning's not done to you, like I'm doing to you tonight. You're sitting there and I'm lecturing you, right? Right? But we want children to feel like they're the ones leading the learning. That you have ideas and you can act on them. That you can influence what happens to you and you can initiate your own path. So when I was researching and observing so many children and teachers in classrooms and preschools, I saw so many children who would have an idea and they were able to act on it. They weren't waiting for the teacher to say, this is what you need to do, then you need to do this, then you need to do this, you can't do this. There were boundaries, because boundaries are important. That creates security. But the children had this inner drive that, and it could have been like as a 4-year-old, oh, I want to make a river in the sandpit, and then they could access what they needed to make the river. They initiated their own learning. In a primary school, it might have been, oh, I've got an idea for a book I want to make, and then they could go and get the materials for a book, and they could initiate that path themselves. They didn't have to wait to be told what to do. So having agency in your life is doing rather than being done to. Us doing, not being done to. So the doing is the internal, the done to is the external. Making decisions rather than only following the decisions of others. Thank you for the nods of heads from some of you. I know that I'm making sense. Does that remind you of something? Yeah, that's probably why you sent your children to Dalton. I am not led, I lead. This is agency at its very core. Not mindlessly following, but having ideas, having opinions, and having the confidence and the skills to initiate and to act. So what's the opposite of learner agency? Let's see if we can go. No. Sorry, I might have to go up there after all. Mindless compliance. And I know that's not what you want for your children, whether you're their teacher or their parent. Right? We don't, that's not the way that we create a world where we can solve some of these big problems that we have if children are only mindlessly complying. Shall I go up there so I can do that? So the opposite of learner agency is also disengagement. Maybe it looks like this. Hopefully it doesn't look that bad, but I can remember in high school particularly. Anyone else feel that way too? Yeah. Right. So when children feel a sense of agency, these are some of the benefits. They're confident in their abilities. They learn transferable skills and strategies. So what they're learning can be applied in lots of different situations. And they also have the confidence and that sense of agency that they can do that. And it's not just confined to one time or place. They're more engaged in their learning. They're more involved in their learning. They're intrinsically motivated. That means they don't need to have rewards. They don't need, do this and I'll give you a sticker. Do this and I'll give you a tick. They're driven from within because they have this inner purpose. They initiate their learning. They have a sense of purpose. They lead their learning. I think that's a really big idea, which is the motto for Dalton. They're leading, not just following. They also think critically and creatively. So when I see children acting with a sense of agency, I see that they build knowledge about things, but they don't just have knowledge, they don't just know things. I see that they use it as well. They apply it. So they use it in lots of different ways, and that's that idea of transferring it. They also have a greater sense of well-being. So lots of benefits for learning, for academic learning, but also huge benefits for their well-being. And what we know about well-being is that if we're not feeling good about ourselves, we can't really learn. I had that personal experience just a little while ago, a few months ago, where my house was broken into. And so for a couple of weeks, I had a stressed brain. For a couple of weeks, I couldn't make a decision. I think if somebody had said, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" I probably would have burst out crying. I kept losing things, like I'd put my keys somewhere and I didn't know where they were. And I was constantly reliving what it was like to have my house broken into. And I kept thinking, this is what it's like for some children who have a very stressed brain. So when we don't have strong well-being, when we don't feel good about ourselves, then we can't learn. Our brain won't let us. That's connected to agency, because when we do feel like we have a say in our learning and a say in our life, we're going to feel better about ourselves. Right? If we feel like we've got no say in our lives, if we feel like nobody is listening to us, if we feel like all we have to do is follow instructions, then we often don't feel good about ourselves either. They're happier, more satisfied. They're equipped to lead their lives, not only follow. And they're equipped to make change when it's needed, instead of just accepting something that's not right for them. So agency is actually an innate capacity in all of us. We can't give someone agency. We're born with the capacity for agency, every one of us. But sometimes the external factors don't allow that agency to shine, if you like. So we all have the capacity for it, but we don't all feel the sense of agency. But do you know when agency begins? We're all born with that capacity, but the sense of agency, the feeling that we're in control of our lives, that we make things happen, actually begins in very early infancy, like here. So this beautiful baby is learning that when they move their arm, they make the mobile move. It happens very, very young that they start to build this idea that I can make things happen. No? So it's not something that just magically appears when they go to school. It really starts in very young infancy. So what can learner agency look like in schools? I'm going to share a couple of stories from some of my partner schools in Australia and some of the schools that I studied when I was writing the book, when I researched the book. So these two authors, they are celebrating their authorship. Just like me, they created a book. And so they have this strong sense of agency because they were not told, your book needs to be about this topic, and this page needs to be that, and the second page needs to be that. That would just be following, right? Their teacher taught them very clearly how to come up with a topic that they care about, that they know about, and then the teacher very expertly taught them what we call crafting devices, so they had the knowledge to engage your reader, both with the illustrations and the words. And now look at their smiles. They feel so proud, right? So their sense of agency was that they have ideas and they can communicate them. It can also look in early childhood in particular. How many of you have heard your children say this? I can do it. What are they, like 2 or 3? Me do it, me do it. You know, when they go through that stage, they want to do everything. So a sense of agency also can look like children doing for themselves, not doing for children. And this is a little story from a group of educators that I was working with who teach 4-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds. And we were talking about this idea of building children's sense of agency by doing more with the children rather than doing it for the children. And these teachers said, you know what, we have fruit time every day, but we do fruit time to the children. We cut up the fruit, we tell them where to sit, we pass the fruit around to them. The only thing they choose is which piece of fruit they want. And they said to me, I think we can do this better. I think we can do this with the children. Why aren't they involved in it more? And so they transformed this beautiful ritual of fruit every day by bringing the children into the process. And it has led to such a huge sense of agency for these children. It also has led to this beautiful time of language building, because every day 2 children are invited to come and help cut up the fruit. But the 2 times I've visited this preschool, there's also like 6 other children sitting around watching them, giving them advice. Don't do it that way. And talking, and they're building lots of language as well. But just watch this video and think about how this child would be feeling. I know what you were thinking there. Have a couple of minutes just to talk with the people next to you about what you noticed about the child, maybe what the child was feeling. We can hypothesise, but maybe what the teacher did or didn't do. Just have a minute to chat to the person next to you. Thanks, everyone. Let's gather back. Were you like going, oh my goodness, are they going to cut their fingers with the... You can't help that though, can you? So the teachers have taught the children the safe way to use all of the instruments. Like there was some explicit modelling and teaching and practicing. And they also bought real materials, which are actually safer than trying to do something like that with plastic, because it probably would break and it could splinter. It's actually not as safe. So they bought real tools, but that were good for the child's hand. And then they modelled and taught the children how to use them safely, and then handed it over to them. But what you might not have heard in the video is one of the children around the table was telling the child who was cutting the fruit, no, you need to turn it the other way. It will be better if you turn it the other way. And the teacher said, did you hear, I can't remember his name, Ollie, did you hear Ollie's suggestion? And then the child, I think, was just so involved, was like, no, I'm doing it this way. But did you notice how the teacher held back? Because I know it's so hard sometimes as a teacher and a parent. The easy thing would be to get in there and even say, oh, let's turn it over and try it this way, or let me get it started for you. But allowing that child a little struggle, watching the child, because a little struggle is healthy. A little struggle builds resilience, it builds persistence, and it builds a sense of agency, because if the teacher had gone in and done it for them, then he probably wouldn't have felt, I can do this. But didn't get a sense like he would have been like, oh, I can do this. This is important work, yeah? So quite often it's what we don't do. What that teacher would have been doing, I'm sure, if I could get inside her mind, was watching for those little signs where the child might have become frustrated. And when you saw that little change of, oh, it looks like it's gone from a bit of a struggle or challenge to frustration, and then that's when we would have offered support. But he was fine, wasn't he? So sometimes a sense of agency looks like a little bit of struggle, but I've heard someone call it productive struggle, right? It's not so much struggle that you're going to feel frustrated or lose that sense of I can. It's like that, you know, when something's a little bit hard, but you do it and you feel so good afterwards. Yeah, so even cutting up fruit. It can also look like rituals of belonging, because the rituals of belonging is about that group of children feeling safe with each other and safe with their teacher. And when they feel emotionally safe and secure, like they do in their families, then they will be more likely to be fully themselves and initiate their ideas. If they're not emotionally safe, they probably will be too afraid to try something new. Yeah? So this is a story from actually 5-year-olds. They were in their first year of school in Australia, in Perth. And one of the rituals that the teacher created with the children was this little tea party that they did at the beginning of the term to mark, we've been away for 2 weeks from each other, we're going to have a tea party so that we can talk to each other about our holidays. So instead of doing to the children, she involved the children. And so as you can see, they set the table and just, you know, making it a little special. When you make the place a little special, we're saying to the children, you're valued, you're important, and so are the conversations that you're having here. And then they poured themselves their tea, and I've got some other photographs, and oh my goodness, it would be like watching a group of adults at a tea party because they were all having these conversations, right? But these little rituals, which might be like at the beginning of the day doing a song of welcome, a song using children's names. With older children, it might be a way that you enter the classroom and say hello to your teacher. It's a ritual. And rituals are the things in our lives that bind us together, that give us markers in our day and also help us feel secure, right? So when they're rituals of belonging. It can also look like children being involved in decisions that affect them. So this actually is connected to the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of the Child. I think it's Article 12 from memory, which says children have the right to be consulted in decisions that affect them. So it's in the UN Convention. And this is an example. So, you know, from a very different context, it's a preschool in Adelaide. We are very fortunate to have these beautiful outdoor spaces because we don't live in a big city like Hong Kong. But it doesn't matter what it is, it's how the children were involved. So this is, can you see the middle drawing? The children are on one of those slack lines. So there's 2 lines and they could climb it. I should model it for you. And so instead of the teachers doing to the children, saying, here are the rules, this is what you need to do. You need to sit on that chair and wait till somebody comes up. We could make those rules. But the teachers said, let's talk about what is the safe way to use the slackline and what we want to learn. So they talked about how important it is, how much fun it is, how it helps us to learn balance and control. So the children drew the tick one. Then on the other side, what do we have to think about so we're safe? So the children were involved in what we call a benefit risk assessment. So they are thinking then about, well, if we want to play on the slack line because it's so much fun and it helps us to learn, what can't we do? And then the third one is the teacher writing up the rules that the children came up with. You have to wait on chairs. If someone is still moving, you have to wait. When someone is on the reel, you can go. The reel is a big reel that they sat on. Only 2 at a time because 3 would be dangerous. They're the words of the children. So the main idea here is that instead of doing 2 children, we can involve them and they feel like they've been heard. They feel like they've got a say and they're probably going to follow those rules a whole lot more because they've been involved in them rather than just being done to. It can also look like children choosing the materials that they use, and in this case, these are what we call loose parts. They're outside big loose parts, but we could also use small loose parts. But having some materials where they choose, instead of limiting their choice and just putting certain things out for them to play, that they can choose what they are learning with. It can look like having a say in what you learn and cultivating their curiosity. How am I going for time? Good. So here's a beautiful story of a preschool in Adelaide. Actually, the kindy that I went to. So these are 4-year-olds. As you can see in the first photograph, there was a whole group of children who were fascinated with the rubbish trucks. Can you see that in the background there? With solo written on it. So they're our garbage trucks, our rubbish trucks. And so the teacher used that interest and made the suggestion, I wonder how we could make our own garbage truck. Didn't tell the children what they had to do or how, but just put that suggestion there based on their interest. And then can you see the garbage truck that they made from the blocks? So they're building their sense of agency because they feel like their ideas are important. And then it went on because they were really fascinated about how the bins are lifted from the street into the great big garbage container on the back of the truck. And so then that led the teacher to introduce the idea of pulleys. And so they made these pulleys to practice what it would be like with the bins. So a sense of agency can be honoured and built by teachers following children's interests. It also got some Dalton photos from a few years ago here. It can also look like choosing what you read. Did you have the same experience as me? I actually didn't read, I think, for pleasure from the time I was maybe 15 to 25. And the whole reason I didn't read for pleasure is because I hated being told what to read. At high school, I was told I had to read these books. I passed all my English exams, and I don't think I read many of them. I would watch the movie, or I would, I don't know, find out somehow. Don't know how I did it. But I remember really feeling like reading was a chore when I was told what to read. I had no control. One of my favourite books of all time was a book that I was told to read in year 10, and I didn't. When I finally read it, when I was in my 20s, I was like, oh my goodness, what was I missing? But the idea that having to read something that you have no control over can actually diminish a child's sense of agency. So when you hear that your teachers are encouraging children to have their favourite authors or their favourite genres or to follow a series, it's all connected to this idea that they're building their agency in their learning. It can also look like choosing the topics you write about. Don't know if we've got children here of any of the parents that are here. I reckon this was from my first visit, Sean, with the masks still. Yeah. Right, so like the girls in that first slide, when writers learn that to really have an identity as a writer, you write about things that you care about and you know about. You don't write about topics that the teacher sets you that you have no connection to. So building again this sense of agency, this sense of being in control of my learning. So I had lots of early childhood examples, but I wanted to share this one from older children. The next one's from older children, sorry. It also can look like in schools that children's thinking and ideas are valued and their thinking is made visible and it's used to drive the learning. So it's actually really sophisticated teaching. It's much easier to follow a textbook, but that's not going to engage minds and hearts. This way we're trying to engage the minds and the hearts of the children so that they'll be lifelong learners. So you might see charts that share the children's thinking. Here's the one I thought I was sharing with you. Critical literacy is the ability to read things and think critically about them and not just to accept everything. It's how to think about what you read, view and create. It's learning the power of the word to make things happen and advocate for change. So the first example, these were both from 12-year-olds in Adelaide from our schools we work with. In the first one, I'll just read you a little bit of it. And perhaps you can see how this child understands the word has the power to change thinking or to change hearts and minds. I am a tree, I sway in the winds. Like all other trees, I need water to survive. I'm part of nature. We trees create forests for plants and create creatures to thrive and survive. We were here eons and eons ago, living in harmony with creatures of all different sizes. We shared life with each other. We produce oxygen for creatures, and when they die, their bodies become new soil for us. But then you came along. Can you see where that's going to go? So what amazing writing for a 12-year-old to take the perspective of a tree. You know that she's trying to convince her reader to think about probably environmental causes, perhaps the deforestation of the world. I know it's a she, she understands not only the power of the word, but she knows that she has the power to use the word to create change. And then the second one, this is the draft. It wasn't sent like this, of course, but this shows the work in progress of Mila. And Mila was writing to our Prime Minister in Australia. Dear Scott Morrison, might have put Prime Minister Morrison, but she might have done that in her final published. But dear Scott Morrison, our world, your world, the world's world. It's up to us to change our mistake. Otherwise, it will affect the next generation. So I will share some information to inform you about the situation. pollution. Look, I promise you that there will be at least 3 pieces of rubbish outside, but at least you can see maybe a beach or a tree. Places like Canada and India, all they see are piles and piles and piles of rubbish. This is written by, I think actually she was 10. But the idea here is that we're wanting children to understand that they can have a say and influence the world. And it's not just about mindless compliance and copying what the teacher has asked them to do. The opposite can look like everyone doing the same thing at the same time and little room for their critical and creative thinking. It's a big difference, isn't there? So that's very connected to a sense of agency too. So, how can we support the child at home? We can encourage children to do for themselves. So whether you're a parent or a teacher here, maybe there's something that you can encourage your child to do for themselves. It might be carrying their bag. It might be packing their bag. It might be putting their shoes on. But something that they can have that sense of, I can do it. Provide opportunity to make choices, but choices that you can follow through with. It's no good saying, oh, you tell us where we're going to go on our next family holiday when you've already booked the tickets to go somewhere, right? They've got to be real choices. Provide boundaries and stick to them. So, whilst we're talking about listening to children's ideas, giving them choices, we must also have boundaries because boundaries create security for children. And we need to stick to whatever those boundaries are, right? So boundaries that know exactly, that's actually the adult's decision in the family. Adults need to make this decision for the family, but children can make these decisions for the family. And having that boundary is really important. I just wanted to make sure that it didn't sound like we were saying it was a free-for-all and children were making all the decisions in the family. Less toys, this is particularly for those of you with young children, less toys that offer one way to play and more open-ended play. This is what I mean by the toys that offer one way to play. So, this is okay every now and then, but if this is the only thing you have to play with, once you press the buttons, it's done. Nothing wrong with princess dress-ups, but if it's only princess dress-ups, we're only going to ever get princess play and princess language, right? So I sometimes say, this is like fast food. It's okay to have McDonald's every now and then, but it's not healthy to have it for breakfast, lunch and dinner every day, yeah? So open-ended enables children to act on their ideas and to put their thinking into it. So we've got dolls' houses and train kits, because we can set that train set up different ways. The mobilo and the construction, the dress-ups that can become lots and lots of different characters, and even just, using scarves and fabric, because then the children do the transforming, they do the thinking. We can nurture their interests and foster a sense of curiosity. We can enjoy first-hand experiences. I wasn't sure what to call these. They're like field trips, like whether it's to go on a hike or go to a park or to try rock climbing together, or go to museums. Those kind of first-hand experiences and reading and viewing about the things that children are curious about. How many of you have got children who are fascinated with dinosaurs? Or unicorns? I don't know how you're going to visit a unicorn, but yeah. So following up on their ideas to help them see that their interests are important. But make sure we talk about, what did you learn from reading this? What did you learn from viewing this? So it's not just a passive experience. And a really helpful idea is to provide little notebooks for children to draw and write about the things that they're interested in. So they're almost like little researchers then, right? So it's a place that they can keep their ideas. I want to finish with this big idea, because I think whether we're adults or whether we're parents or whether we're teachers, this idea of doing less to children, less for children, and doing more with them is probably a bit of a mantra that I think is really helpful for us, and to develop children's feeling like they're in control of their learning and of their life. It's not just being done to them. So I'll finish there, but if anyone has, I'll come down now that I don't need to be on the stage. And I'm very happy to respond to any questions, whether you would like to do that now or come up to me afterwards. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to pose now? And if not, I know sometimes it's much nicer just to come up afterwards, isn't it, and have a chat. Very happy to do that. Well, thank you again, those parents in particular of the Dalton children. Thank you for sharing your children with me today and tomorrow and on Monday. Thank you for sharing your school with me too. I hope that you found tonight interesting and maybe thought-provoking. And I wish you every happiness and luck. Thank you.